What is going on, good people of the internet? We are back once again to have a show that we like to call Blerd Grounds, where we, as African American nerds, black nerds, blurs, whatever you want to call us, we come here every week to talk about whatever we want to talk about, whether it be comics, anime, video games, whatever we care about when it comes to nerd culture and the impact that it has had on us. We have come here to talk about it once again. Don't forget you can listen to this podcast like right now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Overcast, wherever you can listen to a podcast besides SoundCloud. We are available to you because SoundCloud is too expensive. But anyway, you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Blerd Grounds. And you can check out our host website on comicsground.com. Put some hyphens between those words, where we post daily new reviews, previews, news stories, opinion pieces every weekday for you. Now, let's get right into it. My name is James Portis. To my left, we have the Afro picking, vape having, putting that work in every day with the welding, Travis Tucker. How you doing? And he's nowhere to be heard.
I'm here, man. I'm doing all right, man. Just doing that dad thing, coming down off of Cece's birthday, so just trying to get the glitter out of my hair.
Hey, that must have been like perfect. Like have the whole birthday, and then like Disney Plus just rolls in perfect for you.
Oh yeah, and it was. I got a gift too because the impeachment inquiry started on her birthday, so it's been just
yes, perfect.
Remember the 14th of November.
Hey. I'm not gonna lie, like all of the stuff that's been going on, and then what's even great is like impeachment's going on, and we get to talk about a little bit of political stuff today because of the source material. So yay, this is perfect. I love it.
It's so good.
It was so good. Okay, but then also, like you've already heard him talking a little bit. We have the man who has a spare apartment on every LAX flight because all he does is fly. Mr. Marcus, how you doing this evening?
I'm very tired, but I'm hanging in there. What's going on, y'all?
All right. And then, as Jasmine and Aaron were not able to make it this evening, they apologize for not being able to make it. But we have a special guest for you this evening. We have the writer of the brand new comic Elk Mountain, his work on Bitch Planet triple feature over at Image Comics. He has his own podcast that he's getting back going, the Stark After Dark, and the amazing comic, The Black Experience. Mr. Jordan Clark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. I feel special. That was a lot of specials in that introduction. So, yeah, no, I feel good. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
No problem. So, obviously, you like find yourself in a very particular place right now when it comes to like your new book Elk Mountain, specifically with obviously like we just said, the impeachment hearing like started today, but you're not afraid to, when it comes to the current, I guess, like gatekeeping way about it, you like aren't afraid to shove politics into your comic books as they would like to say.
Yeah. I feel like we're in a time where everything you do is political in a way. Like even not being political is somewhat of a political act. So I feel like, instead of trying to dance around it or trying to avoid it completely, because I feel like you kind of step into it anyways. So why not just make comics that are reflecting the world that we live in, kind of documenting the times that we live in, and just be honest with it. And I feel like that's where you're going to get the best work. So that's what I've been trying to do and what I tried to do with Elk Mountain.
Okay. Now, like, when you first open it, it just seems like a very harmless, just superhero story in an indie shell, but then it immediately hits you with about how charged it is with trying to make an impact on immigration and everything going on there. And like what's even mind blowing is you go from something like the Black experience, but then tackling something that hardcore when it comes to like a whole different race of people when it comes to immigration and how it's affected our country with like Spanish people being in camps and whatnot. What made you want to go on that route?
So I'm black and I'm also part Puerto Rican. So Puerto Ricans are in a strange place because we are citizens of the United States of America, but not always treated that way, and especially after Hurricane Maria and everything that happened with that when the president came to visit the islands. Like, some Puerto Ricans might have a feeling of superiority in a sense, and obviously we can't technically be deported because we are citizens, so it doesn't work like that. But at the same time, I feel a connection to all of my other Latinx brothers and sisters who are going through some very terrible things. And just as a citizen of this country, you know what I mean? Like, if you're watching this, you have to feel some kind of way where obviously that's not how we are as a country, how we want to represent ourselves to the rest of the world. But also, we're somewhat complicit in the sense that, like, this is happening in our country to people who are coming into our country. And, I felt a need to speak out on that because, having comics, specifically superhero comics, I feel like, you can kind of fall into, the everyday rut of it where, there's heroes and there's villains and, they kind of do the same thing over and over again in a cycle. But having somebody with a lot of power facing a situation where, they may not be 100% powerless, but, in Elk Mountain, you have our hero Valor, who is a immigrant superhero. And like, what are his options? Like, okay, he could go and destroy, all the camps and whatnot, but that doesn't make anybody a citizen. Like, that doesn't really help anybody become a citizen of the United States of America. He could sit by and watch it happen, which is obviously, not a great option either. So it is kind of that really interesting, catch-22 situation where you have somebody who, they have all these powers, they can do all these things, but what does that power really mean? And what does that power really get you in the end? So I think that's kind of one of the things we wanted to get at with that.
All right, Travis, you want to take it from there for us?
Yeah, in Elk Mountain, I found it very interesting how you had tied Valor's meaning to the town as a direct symbol of hope. With that being said, is his name Rick Roll?
His name is Red River Rick.
Okay. I just figured Rick and rolling dice. I don't know. But assuming that he is that Rick is an allegory for greed, what would the other villains of Elk Mountain be symbols of, so to speak?
So we wanted to kind of balance, the political stuff and, the high action stuff with a little bit of, the things that we love about comics. And I'm a big Silver Age comics fan. So I like the kind of more out there weird villains. And we wanted to try to, put them in there and kind of give, the feel of those Silver Age villains, but also, looking at kind of a real life situation, right? So like Toyman isn't really scary, right? Like Toyman as a villain is kind of silly and a joke. And obviously Superman is going to stop Toyman every time. But if Toyman was real and Toyman was in your city and he had evil, murderous killer toys running through the street, I mean, that's a problem for everyday regular people. And so having these villains who, yeah, it's funny and it's silly when like Batman is there and Superman is there and, all these heroes are there who can just kind of get them out of there real quick. But everyday regular people, being faced with these situations where, you have these villains who, if they ever got loose, if they ever went unchecked, could do a lot of real damage, in cities and towns. We wanted to kind of show that side of it too. So there isn't maybe as deep a symbolism with all of them. I think, we wanted to kind of, play again more of that Silver Age feel. But there's a symbol in terms of, if you look at um, like you're talking about with greed, or just, in general, where you have uh, I mean, right now there are Nazis walking around the streets
You're not wrong
of
about that.
America. You know what I mean?
Yup.
So, when you let stuff like that go unchecked, right? When you let these things become normal, and take over, uh, that becomes a real problem. Like that's a real issue. And so, there is some responsibility for us as citizens, to be able to look at these things and say that I don't accept that. Like those are things that we're just not going to have here. But when people are allowed to kind of normalize those things, that's when it becomes a real issue.
Okay. Now, one thing that was intriguing to me was, like, we know that Elk Mountain was a Kickstarter book. We know that, like, you were trying to put your best foot forward, but I do think a lot happened in this first like taste we get of the story, like,
Hmm.
and I wonder, is there like going to be any attempt for like a issue zero at some point so we can get more background rather than just jumping straight into everything? Like, there's obviously a relationship to be had, with the parents, and where his powers come from. There's
Hmm.
obviously like how the partnership began with him and his best friend trying to like save the immigrants and whatnot. Like,
Hmm.
they talk about how from high school and them doing football and whatnot. There's obviously more here going on. Is there any hope to get more of that story going on? Not just from a part two, but like from a possible issue zero, or if you could go back and like do more of a intro type issue for the story.
For sure. I think in part two, we do give a lot of that background stuff coming in, where Alex Valor is adopted, but we do get more information about his birth parents. We do get more information about where his powers came from, um, and just more of that kind of background. So not as much in terms of his relationships with some of the people in the town, but I definitely would love to explore that. I feel like you're saying, it's a Kickstarter book, so we have certain limitations in terms of, like, you know how we're going to plan this out, how much money we're going to ask for, and that kind of dictates page count and things like that. So we're not able to get everything in there as if it was a published book where we had a little bit more leeway and we could kind of play around with uh the size and the scope of the book. But if that was a possibility, and obviously if people are asking for it, if people want it, I definitely feel like that's something that we would love to do, is kind of dig more into not only just the backstory of Valor, but like you're saying, a lot of the other people in the town itself, because we did want to give it a vibe of if Superman had just never left Smallville. So it is this
Yeah.
town. Yeah, it is this town where everybody knows Valor is Alex and Alex is Valor, and it's not really a secret in terms of his identity and the things that he does around the town. Um, and I kind of like that idea, because when you think about a lot of these bigger superhero stories, specifically if you think about Marvel New York, like there's a million superheroes in New
Mm.
York in the Marvel
Mm.
universe, and it's like every other block, you're seeing some crazy person in spandex running around doing whatever with all kinds of powers. And it's not like, I mean, I was in New York for New York Comic Con, and you just see stuff on the street sometimes. So I can't even imagine, in the Marvel universe, like it's probably not even a thing. You know what I mean? Like you just see somebody, shooting lasers out of their eyes, and it's just Tuesday. Like it's not a big deal. But in a small town like that, like I like the idea of like the intimacy of, like, you know, I think about the Flash and kind of how in Central City, like it's a big city, but because of his powers, he's able to kind of know everybody, and be, kind of this more personal superhero where, um, it might not be every day where he's fighting villains, but like, yeah, somebody might need help, adding, an addition to their house, or like, it's kind of hinted at in the comic, a tornado comes through. Well, Valor can help rebuild your house, or, stuff like, career day at school, like those little things where he's such a more integral part of the community than just, somebody who fights bad guys. You know what I mean? He's really kind of the heart and soul of that town. So I definitely would enjoy not only, writing more of the character, but digging deeper into, some of that stuff that makes it, a unique relationship between him and the people who live there.
All right. Like, I do like now. It's very interesting that you mentioned the whole like his identity being out in the open and like the whole Superman allegory that's very present in the story. We have the announcement that's been coming up recently with DC that Superman is going to reveal his identity again.
Mm-hmm.
And that trope, obviously, from just that perspective of DC, is very overplayed. But then you create this very like intimate, like you said, intimate home life for Valor, where it's like everybody knows him, and like even when the president of the United States even goes out of his way to tweet about him, it has no effect on the environment of the town. They still have the parade.
Yeah.
That's like I really like that.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where, like for example, like I live in Baltimore, and we're a very proud city, and I think it's like we can talk shit about Baltimore, but like if you don't live here, like we don't appreciate people kind of coming in with outside opinions. And I feel like Elk Mountain is kind of the same way, where it's like, okay, like we might have our criticisms of Valor, or we might have things that we agree with or don't agree with, but like he's ours. You know what I mean? Like he is this thing that represents us to the world at large. And they're very proud of him. They're very protective of him, and there's not really a lot that could happen that would kind of turn them against him. And a little hint at part two is like something does happen that does kind of turn the town a little bit. So that kind of adds another layer of things to it. But yeah, I think, that's again, something that it's kind of hard to do when you have, these bigger scale stories, because obviously Batman has a very unique relationship with Gotham. And certain other superheroes have very special relationships with their town, but again, when you're in a New York, where there's just everybody's just there, or you're in a kind of nondescript city, you do kind of lose that uniqueness with the town, the people, the hero, and those layers of relationship at play. So Superman as Clark Kent as Superman, that everything just kind of out there in the open could be interesting. I'll check it out and see how that goes. But I feel like Superman, especially like that duality of Clark Kent and Superman, I wouldn't say it's essential. Like there is stuff that you can do where it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. But it is, I mean, you think of just Christopher Reeves and kind of that bumbling Clark Kent, and then him, going to the phone booth and turning into Superman. Like, there's something kind of just like timeless about that I feel like I always enjoy. So, Bendis is doing his Bendis thing, and like I think he's gonna figure out how to make that work. But I don't know if I don't know.
Okay.
I'll check it out.
Okay. I want to come back to like superhero representation a little bit later, like in terms of your opinion on it. But I want to like flip the script a little bit and talk more about like the smaller thing you had before when it came to the Black experience.
Okay.
And so Marcus, I wanted to bring you on and see what you like. We'll give some questions and whatnot.
Okay, so when I was thinking about just the stories like the Black Experience and the James Baldwin story and BFF, what I've noticed is that you utilize trauma, like the trauma that Black people have from racism, not only in this country but in the world, and then it's used in different ways. Like for the Black Experience, is used to kind of show other people this is what it's like to walk in our shoes, and then with the James Baldwin story, how one man reacts to that trauma, even though he's seemingly escaped it from going from one country to the other. And then with BFF, there's kind of a comedic touch to it, like, hey, we're gonna monetize this trauma, and if you want to be close to blackness and use blackness, you got to kind of pay the price a little bit. So I just wonder, is that something that you try and use a lot, black people's experience with trauma, or just trauma in general when you're writing and creating?
Yeah, it's hard to escape it. um, it's one of those things where even in my reading of superhero stories, where you have heroes of color, it's one of those things where you know I see them, doing stuff and going about their everyday life. But I think for, a lot of black people, and at least this is my experience, is like it's never that far away. Like
Hmm.
it's never a situation where you just kind of like, oh, okay, like I don't have to think about that today because whatever, or I can kind of put that out of my mind. Like you do forget about it in the sense that you might be very involved in something, or you might be enjoying Disney Plus or whatever, and you're
Yes.
kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, like I can escape for a little bit, but then
Right.
like you'll turn on the news and you'll be like, oh.
It's very
Okay.
jarring when you go from That's So Raven to impeachment hearings.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, okay, this is happening today.
Right.
uh,
Right. There's always a reminder very
yeah,
close.
well, because even the black experience starts with you as this fictional black person waking up and getting this text about, oh, like the police just almost shot this kid and like arrested him, like, good morning, and you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, I can either kind of disassociate and try to go on with my day, or I can like just let that sink in. And like I have moments where I'll just either go outside or uh just be going about my business, and it's that brief thought that like, am I going to make it home today? Like, am I just going to like, am I going to get to the end of today? And it's not even like a existential dread kind of thing that's sinking in. It's just like a general question that like just randomly will pop into your head from time to time.
Right.
um
Right.
so,
Right.
so I definitely think there is a lot of trauma in our community, unfortunately. But again, I think through art, one of the things I really want to do is express that and explore that, because for me it can be hard sometimes to just kind of have those conversations with people, and it's not a fun conversation. Like, I think that's one of those misconceptions where people just think black people like talking about race all the time, but like we'd rather just not do that because we'd rather
Right.
not have to
Right.
deal with that.
Yeah.
But we can't not do it because that's just like, that's like a safety issue. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a general like real world safety issue. Like, we have to be conscious of the world around us and the way that people see us. So, I try to interrogate that through my art and through my writing. Um, but it can be difficult. So, I mean, writing some of those stories, it was fun and liberating in a way, but it was also kind of sobering in another way, where you're just kind of like, uh, I've had experiences where people have read that story at a con, and they've just kind of stopped and they're just like, this is too real. This is like, I'm feeling things, just from different panels. I'm kind of flashing back to certain things. And it's good in the sense that it can spark that conversation. We can talk about it. Um, but like you were saying, like whether it's, has a more comedic twist to it, or whether it has, that more real world twist with the Baldwin story. Um, I feel like it's something that is important for me to put into my work. Like, I feel like um, you can never have enough of that, like just having stories like that being told, and, reaching our community, because I feel like, there's something special and important where you can you can read a story and you feel that the person who is writing the story is speaking to you, right? Because
Right.
having people of color, black people specifically, writing stories about our experience, I think it kind of lets you know that you're not crazy. Like, sometimes, I have experiences. I'm like, is this just me? Like, does this just happen to me? But then I'll read a comic that somebody did, and I'm like, oh no, this is a universal experience. Like we all kind of go through something similar to this.
Right,
So I
part
think
of the culture.
right. So it's also just another way for us to kind of like uh kind of like cross reference this. Like, am I the only black person dealing with these feelings or thoughts or emotions, or it's
Hmm.
all of us? Okay, that makes me feel a little better, I guess. Like I wish none of us were dealing with it, but it's good to kind of have that solidarity as well.
Definitely.
All right, Travis, your thoughts or questions?
Moving into the the skin that I'm in, uh, I I can't help but notice, and I laughed real hard when you mentioned why Ben Carson got to make the only one got to make money off of this. And then later on in the same segment, you mentioned Candace Owens and David. Oh, I
David
forget his
Clark,
name.
yeah, the
Yeah,
sheriff.
David
David
Clark.
Clark.
Hmm.
David. Okay, and I wanted to get your opinion on if there's a difference between the two of Candace Owens and Ben Carson, because there's a part where he mentions that he ain't one of us and he's on that Tom app.
Yeah. Like it is
Mm.
this very difficult uh thing where like I see it and I understand and I empathize in the sense of why they are the way they are and why they do the things they do, right? Because I mean it all goes back to the trauma in the sense that you can either kind of accept the reality of things, right? Like you just kind of like, yes, this is the way that it is, and that like I don't like it and I don't enjoy it, but like I'm understanding of this reality, so I'm going to do my best to try and change things, or kind of like the three of them in the sense that, oh, like what can I do to like game the situation, or like not even just personally benefit from the situation, but there's a desire, I think, in the three of them to kind of get as close to whiteness as possible, right?
Ooh.
So that they are protected from racism in general. But I mean, at least two of them, Candace Owens and Ben Carson, have complained about racism, in the past. But then turn around and claim that racism is like over or like not a thing anymore. But it's kind of like, when OJ was like, "Oh, I'm not black, I'm OJ," right? You know what I mean? Or even,
That kooky
Kanye
stuff.
now,
Oh my
who's kind
god.
of doing a similar situation where, it's this thing where like, I don't, well, yeah, I don't, is Candace Owens rich? Does she have money?
I don't
I don't
know.
understand her or her situation. But yes, when you're OJ or you're Kanye or somebody who has enough money, who you feel like racism shouldn't affect me anymore because I'm as rich as some of these people. So like
I think
we're
slavery was a choice,
peers in a
apparently.
yeah.
Oh,
So you feel like
Ugh.
you're their peer in a sense, right? Because like financially you're on equal footing, and sometimes in this country it feels like that's the only thing that matters is like, do you have a lot of money? Okay, well then like people should respect you or treat you a certain way. And when that doesn't happen, you're kind of like, well, what else do I have to do? How else do I get into, these clubs or, at least certain social circles? So, there's always been a history of black people who are, yeah, basically like, cooning it up in a sense, I guess, to try to it's trying to protect themselves. I get that sense of like, if I just get on the other side of this fence, and point at the rest of you, like maybe nothing will happen to me, but like it doesn't work that way. Like they're all expendable. They're only as useful to the people that they're, aligning themselves with as, those people feel they are. Because the second it's like, oh, okay, like, Candace Owens doesn't have any cachet anymore. What is she gonna do? You know what I mean? Who's she gonna? What conferences is she gonna speak at? Because once she's not, the new hot cool thing anymore, like they'll find somebody else, and she'll just be out there looking stupid.
See, like that's what was Travis. I don't mean to cut you off, or you, Jordan. I don't mean to cut you off, but like
yeah.
you just like reminded me, like, because you already did like stab the coconut with the straw. I'm gonna just crack the whole thing open here, because like you're reminding me of when Candace Owens and T.I. and all of them were at the Revolt conference, and T.I. and Candace are just going at it about like the different sides of the argument of racism, and then Killer Mike just stands up and goes, "Can y'all quit arguing about whose massa is better?" like that whole argument right there, where you see T.I. trying to be like down with the liberals and doing the thing, and then Candace is hardcore like serving the white man. But then out of left field, you just see Killer Mike go, "Can we care about black folks?"
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like at the end of the day, look, obviously, are black people a monolith? No, we're all different. We are human beings. We are people, right? So we all have different opinions. Some of us agree with each other. Some of us disagree with each other. But we're all, hopefully, some of us, a majority of us, are all trying to get to the same place, right? So like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois did not agree, but they agreed that black people should be free, should not suffer from racism, right? Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. agreed on some things, disagreed on other things, but basically agreed on the end game, right? The end goal. And I feel like, it's always a situation where, like, if we could all just, like Killer Mike's was alluding to, like, we don't need to be, fighting over who's gonna, give us the biggest piece of the pie, as much as like, can we all agree that we shouldn't even be having to fight over that? Like, we shouldn't be having to fight. Right. We shouldn't be fighting for people to give us our humanity. Like, we are human beings. Like, it's not a thing where we need to be asking for that to be recognized. Like, we should just recognize that ourselves. And then, once other people kind of come around to it, then, we can have those discussions. But, yeah, as far as people like that goes, again, like Kanye is out here living a life. I don't know if he's gonna.
Apparently, he don't found Jesus, so I don't even
know. But yeah, I mean, 10 years from now, who can say what Kanye is going to be doing? But I don't think this is going to be a highlight of his life or career when he looks back on things, because it's just, like catering to people who clearly don't view you as a human being is never going to end well for you. So
all right,
we'll see.
Fellas, what else you got for this amazing man who is just like blowing my whole socks off right now?
I'm curious, is there like a passion project that you would like to do, like a character that you've ever really wanted to work with, or like a genre you'd like to work with, that's just something that's just been on your mind that you'd like to do in the future?
Yeah, so I've got all right, I got some stuff that I can talk about. I got some stuff that I can kind of talk about, and I got some stuff that I can't talk about.
Ooh.
I can mention it, but I don't know if I can talk about it.
Just give us a little taste, then. Just a little taste.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So I've been talking to some people at some of the bigger companies, and I do have some work coming out for one of them.
Ooh.
I don't think I can say which one yet.
Okay.
But when I can, I'll definitely let you guys know.
We would love to have you back on for it.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I'm happy about that. I have a project that I'm working on right now that I'm getting ready to send out to some publishers, which is basically inspired by Parliament Funkadelic, inspired by Sun Ra, inspired by a lot of that Afrofuturistic music.
I saw
and
you
just
post
Oh,
on Twitter.
dope.
So it's kind of exploration of that. I've been talking about it, like if Boots Riley directed A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or like if Star Wars was just like Parliament Funkadelic. So kind of taking these ideas and tropes and really exploring how crucial, music has been to us as a community, but also, just if you look at from the moment that we got to this country through the civil rights movement through today where, we've always had music as a part of that, right? Like whether it's the spirituals in the fields or whether it's um the gospel and the protest songs of the civil rights era, whether it's Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole and people like that today. All of these movements, all of these pushes towards freedom has always kind of had a soundtrack of sorts to it. And so I kind of want to explore, just how important music has been to us culturally, but also, the possibilities of music. Because when you look at, even Parliament Funkadelic, I think a lot of people rightfully obviously look at their music as, it's fun, it's a party music, and a lot of it is just about having a good time. But then there's also parts of it which are political commentary, which are social commentary, which are a kind of a larger philosophical idea of just black people being free, right? And I had a weird experience. I don't know if you guys know or enjoy JPEG Mafia, but he's a rapper from here in Baltimore, and I went to see his show on Thursday. And I don't know if y'all have been to any rap shows recently, where there's just a lot of white people.
Yep. Yep. Actually, I have.
Yeah, and it's different, right? Because like they're different in that space, and but watching all the people perform on stage, there's kind of this idea of the like we were talking about before, right? Like obviously every minute of the day we're not thinking about race and racism and all of that stuff, but through the music and through the performance and just watching them perform, like there's a level of freedom, right, that I think black performers can get from their music, especially when the music is about their lived experience and what they kind of go through in this country, where you get to perform that, right, like on stage, and you get to do things that you don't normally get to do, right? Because you can scream on stage, you can fall and roll around on the floor on stage and do all kinds of things on stage that, like, every day we kind of have to police ourselves and our movements and our language. We got a code switch. Can't be too loud at work. Can't be too, aggressive walking around Walmart. Can't.
We have to be well spoken, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do all these things, but you see people on. I mean, again, you see Parliament Funkadelic on stage. Gary Scheider's wearing a diaper. I mean, they're just like they're going all out. They're doing, this level of freedom, this level of expression that they get to do through the music and they get to do through the performance that you kind of can't do in everyday regular life, right? So that's a passion project that I have that hopefully I'm sending that out to a few publishers soon, so fingers crossed on that. As far as like characters, like I wonder sometimes how financially successful I will be, because all of the stuff that I want to pitch to people probably isn't going to make a lot of money. Like, I really want to write a Booster Gold comic, but I don't know.
Oh, that'd be dope.
I don't know how. That's not a big blockbuster kind of thing.
I mean, he's been getting a resurgence lately.
I know he's my favorite superhero. So if I ever got the chance, that would be my top of my list. I have a Cyborg story that I want to write.
Please, God!
I know James got excited for that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think it'd be really cool. I mean, I'll speak on it in the sense that, my take is that for too long, I feel like Cyborg has been kind of trapped in this man versus machine loop where every single comic is he a man? Is he a machine? And I just want to explore more of just like his blackness, like him as a black man, and him as kind of like.
Did you read him during Rebirth?
A little bit.
Because
Like
like
he's been all
there was the whole thing where like they had like started to introduce jazz into his culture a little bit, and like they even
yeah.
tried to tackle police brutality a little bit. And they started to get into it, and then it was like, no, we're gonna go back to Man versus Machine, and I'm like, no.
Well, because the thing about it, right? When you think about Cyborg, and him as kind of a stand-in for just young black men in general, right? Like people view Cyborg as a weapon. People view young black men as just weapons in general, right? Like they're just violence walking around the streets. People view Cyborg as not a human being. People view a lot of young black men as not human beings. Um, and there's so many different parallels there where, I'd love to get him in a situation where, he's kind of mentoring, a younger group of people, whether it be in Detroit or whether it be in, another predominantly black city, where he can kind of, connect with that community more. Because I feel like he's somebody who, I mean, one, he's been in so many different things, right? Like he's been in the Teen Titans. Like he's an OG of the Teen Titans. He's been in the Justice League long enough now that he is like a senior member of that. So I feel like, a lot of that, again, inner turmoil questioning, I'd like to get him to a place where he's not doing that anymore, right? Where he's very comfortable and confident in who he is as a person and what he has to offer the world. And him thinking more on that level of like, how can I change things, right? Because I think one of the major plights of, these black heroes is, okay, like I saved the world today. Flint still doesn't have clean water. I stopped this bank robbery today. But it's still almost impossible for people who live in my neighborhood to get a decent home loan. The community that I live in has been redlined. Like all of these different problems that it's just like, I've saved the universe today, but like, my grandma still has to work and she's like 70. How do I change that? How do I help affect that change? And you've seen stuff again where like I remember in Bendis's, I want to say New Avengers, when Luke Cage was the leader of the Avengers, and he was like, we're going to the hood. Like we're gonna go we're gonna go here and just be here. You know what I mean? It wasn't even like we're gonna fight crime or anything, but it's like we're just gonna be here all day, and you can come and talk to us and approach us and like all this stuff, but like we need to go and help these more underserved communities, right?
That was when Bendis actually knew what to do with a black character. Because you go from that and then Riri, and then hey, no, Naomi's not horrible, but like, ugh.
Well, and that's, I mean, I give Bendis a ton of credit for being somebody who has continually never shied away from trying to introduce more diversity into the comics landscape, because it's not only is it not easy, but you kind of have the stroke that Bendis has to be able to say, I want to do this. I want to make black teenage Iron Man. And Marvel's like, okay, go for it. Because like if I went up to them and said that, that's probably not going to happen. So, it's a real, tricky situation, because I feel like, diversity is obviously very necessary and very needed on the page, but it's almost just as necessary, if not more necessary, behind the page, right? Like having people of color writing these stories, drawing these stories, and editing these stories. Because again, like we were saying before, like having that, it's one thing to read a black character. It's another thing to read a black character and have your own life experience reflected back at you, and knowing that like that the person who wrote that character has also experienced the things that they're writing, right? Like it has another level to it where you can say, oh, okay, like not that only black people should write black characters, not that women should only write women, or LGBTQ people should only write LGBTQ people, but that they should be writing them though, right? Because it's their stories. And so if somebody's got to tell those stories, I'd rather it be somebody from that community. If there's only so many stories and jobs to go around, right? So, the more just wide range, diverse group of people in the industry being able to tell those stories, the better. But until we get there, I'm glad that at least there are people like Bendis who are trying. Like I give you that for trying, because a lot of
Most
people
deaf.
just don't try. So but yeah, I'm always for more inclusion and diversity in all walks of life, but especially in the comic book industry, because there are so many talented people that I know that I would love to see get opportunities to do things, but so many great stories that I think could be told. Just kind of opening the doors a little bit more.
Now, when it comes to that, like you've already talked about, like when it comes to black voices in the industry, but we see this problem that we talked about multiple times on the show before, of just a lack of black characters with their own titles at the big two, and
Hmm.
you even like mentioned it before of just some people just wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta wonder from a creator standpoint, like, is that like hard to a hard pill to swallow that you trying to push that diversity might not be very accepted?
Um, I feel very fortunate that I'm kind of making certain breakthroughs in the industry at a time where I think I don't want to put it in the sense that black people's value is going up, right? Like we're like a commodity, but like that we are proving that um our stories are not just critically viable, but also commercially viable, right? So even if you just look at yesterday, like Ron Wimberly's Prince of Cats is going to get directed by Spike Lee, like that's going to be a big movie, right? Like,
Okay, I didn't hear about that.
yeah, I think it was like a few weeks ago, it was announced that Ryan Coogler is going to produce the Bitter Root movie, and my friend Ezra Clayton Daniels, who did Upgrade Soul, like that's going to get turned into a movie that he's helping to work on. So we're seeing more and more of these, black creators creating a work that is now not only just being, viable within the comic space, but is making that transition into film and other medias. Um, and then just seeing, from people like Vita Ayala to Brandon Easton and Brandon Thomas and Christopher Priest, coming back in and doing what he's been doing, and people like Brian Edward Hill, and just on and on and on. People all throughout, Marvel and DC and independent wise, being able to come in and create works that do have black characters and that do have, a more diverse feel to them. Like I feel like I'm getting in at a good time where there's a little bit more, you know, people are more, from an industry perspective, but also from, a reader perspective, there's more interest, and there's more, just openness to these stories. I think one of the things that, um, it can be tricky just because comics is such a niche industry, right? Like I try to advocate comics to everybody that I know. Like every holiday season, people know that they're getting comics from me because I'm just trying to push it on everybody. Um, but like, like I think a lot of people just don't know where a comic book shop is, right? And like they just don't know where to get comics from. And so, you can go to a Barnes and Nobles, or, they might have some stuff in a Walmart or places like that. But comics used to be at the grocery store, and comics used to be on the newsstand, and comics used to be, very accessible. And so I think part of the issue is, when you look at a lot of these books, specifically if we're talking big two books, the way that things work a lot of the times is like when the book is first announced, it's a big deal, and it's getting all the press and it's getting all the hype. And then when you get to issue 10, like
Not even issue 2.
Right. It's sink or swim. You're either gonna do it or you're not gonna do it. And like, um, I've been fortunate enough to be able to work with Kelly Sue DeConnick and have conversations with her and just kind of see the way that she approaches things. And even when she was at Marvel, when she was doing Captain Marvel, like people look back in retrospect at that book and say, what a great book. Like, look at what she did. Like, she built the Carol Corps and she did all this stuff and it got turned into a movie. And, but at the time when the book was coming out, like, she did that. Like, she hustled that book. Like, she made merch that she took on her own to comic book conventions and was selling. And it was like money out of her pocket that she went into promoting that book, because it wasn't even that Marvel was like, you're on your own, but like, they're putting out 50 something books at a time any given month. So, you're kind of in the situation where you have to be the biggest cheerleader for your own work to get enough eyes on it for it to be a thing that is going to make it to issue 10, 20, 30, however more. So, I think for us, one of the issues is that, I feel like we need to reach Black people in a larger scale, right? Because it's not that Black people don't read IO9 or AV Club or CBR or On Comics Ground or all these other websites. Like, we definitely do that, but like, if you ask the average person, like, have you read Excellence? Have you read Bitterroot? Have you read Prince of Cats? Have you read do you know who Riri Williams is? Like,
Yeah.
probably not, but it's not that Black people don't know. It's just that people in general don't know, because it's not a thing that's being put out, where people are getting their news and their information from. So, it's a little bit of an extra hustle, but reaching out to different circles and different communities and kind of past that nerd bubble where you kind of get into just the more general pop culture area and speak to people who would be interested in it, right? Would be open to it, but it's just like, it's just not in front of their eyes. It's just not in front of their face. So it's a lot of an extra hustle. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just, it'd be nice if you could just make a thing and put it out into the world and then people would find it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you guys know, even just running your website, like, you got to do a lot of work on a daily basis just to get those clicks and get people to come in and check out the content that you're putting out. So it's the same thing for comic books, where I think people are trying, but it's not always as easy as just kind of sending out a tweet or jumping out and doing like a press thing and letting people know the book is out. But it's a sustained, constant hustle that you always have to be putting it out there. So hopefully, again, there's a lot of great talented people doing a lot of great work, but sometimes it just kind of gets lost.
Okay. You just keep speaking gospel, and I love it. Like so much that we are about, and we want to keep going. Like, fellas, do you have any more questions for this man? Because I love hearing this.
No, but I appreciate the wise words, man. Everything was well said and just right on the nose.
Yeah,
I tried.
Yeah, it was right on point. I'm kind of getting lost in what you're saying, because it's honestly, it's mesmerizing.
Like, no.
And it's things we've talked about, but just to hear it from your perspective, because you're kind of the expert in the situation. Just hear it from you really puts a confirmation on it. That you're seeing the same things that we're seeing as I guess consumers or spectators in of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of, like, very, very much so in that Issa Rae vein of just everyone Black. Like, I just want all of us to win, no matter whether we're doing, the big two work or whether we're doing the independent work or the, webcomic work or whatever it is. Because there's this, I go to all kinds of shit. I mean, I go to the big shows like New York Comic Con and all that stuff, and I go to some of the smaller shows like SPX and just some local stuff, and like I see us like we're out we're out there
We
and we're making
exist.
stuff. Yeah, so I try to be as supportive of everyone as possible, just because like I read people's work and I'm just blown away, and I'm just like, how are you not doing things? Like, how are you not getting this published by somebody right now? So I try to be aware as much as possible about what's going on around me, just because obviously, like, I need to be from a professional standpoint, but also just from a fan standpoint. Like, I'm always interested in what's coming up and what's next from from everybody, but just keeping an eye on other creators of color, and trying to make sure that we can kind of come up together. And even with the collection that I did, the skin I'm in, like, that's everybody in that book is black. Like, everybody I worked with, every artist is black in there, and I wanted to make sure that I could reach out to different people who have very different art styles, and just a range of even just experience making comics. And like I was very happy to get to work with that wider range of people, but all coming from the same community. So even just looking at that, like, there's so much talent out there that I'm just excited to get to work with more of them. But even in my own small independent work that I'm doing, like, I'm trying as much as possible to link up with other creators of color, just to make sure that we can continue to push our own brands and get our work out there.
So, in terms of, say, comics that like people should pick up right now, like you already pimped out Upgrade Soul, excellent, bitter, like because those books, holier than thou, like
Yeah.
it, like what are some other books that people you could throw at somebody right now, like, and say, hey, like, come be a part of this culture, come, but like help enrich it. Like, what are some recommendations you could give?
Like, just comics in general, or like
Like
comics by
like black creators.
black creators? Yeah, well, so obviously, Ezra Clayton Daniels again did Upgrade Soul. He also did a book that just came out this year called Bottom Feeders, with Ben Passmore. And Ben Passmore did Your Black Friend, which is one of my favorite comics just of all time. And that had like a whole collection that went along with it. But they collaborated on the story, which is basically like a gentrification horror story, which was amazing. So that's out there. Richie Pope is another one of my favorite cartoonists, and he does just a variety of things. He did a book, like a short comic last year called "This Box That We Sit On," which is basically about if you've ever lived anywhere that has like it is a real question. I don't really know what those boxes are. I think they're like electrical things, but just like kind of out, in somewhat suburban areas. They're just like they're not quite a box, but they're like metal squares that are housing something. But it's just two black kids sitting on it, like speculating like what's inside and talking about just, their lives. I enjoyed that a lot. I mean, even just looking at, the people that I worked with, again, like Amar Smith, who did the Black Experience with me. They have a webcomic called Hellbound that's on Line Webtoon, updates every Sunday. They're doing good stuff. Nicole Miles, who I did the James Baldwin story with, she's doing a wider range of illustration stuff, but she does a lot of really cool comic things. Michael Lee Harris, who I worked with on the Witch story, he's got a lot of great stuff, and we've got some stuff that we're working on together. Akeem Roberts, who did the BFF story, has some webcomic stuff coming out. So, and even people that I know, like Vita Ayala is killing it. So I mean, if you like superheroes, they're doing Livewire. at Valiant, which is amazing right now.
Took
If
her for so long to get her stride.
Yeah, I mean, like Livewire is a character that I really hope that Valiant not only pushes as a comic, but if they're gonna do this whole live action universe, like I know Vin Diesel is a movie star and I know Bloodshot is like the big thing of your universe, but like you need to make a Livewire movie sooner rather than later because I think that would be like that'd be a big deal. That would be the first black female superhero movie. So like the sooner you can kind of do whatever you got to do to get that out there, like please do that. But yeah, I mean there's a ton of people. I mean like Annette Okorafor is doing a lot of great stuff. This is what I would say. I haven't read it yet. I'm very excited for it. N.K. Jemisin just did she's doing a Green Lantern run called Far Sector.
Yep.
That just came out. I need to read it
because reviewing it.
Yeah, I was about to say exclusive review of issue #1 is coming soon. You hear that first. Boom.
Every preview thing I've seen for it like looks incredible, and it's the kind of book that like fingers crossed it does well because we need more books like that. You know what I mean? Just like that speculative fiction about black people in the future in some far off world just doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's nice just to see black people living, like just not being, weighed down by a lot of the things around us. So that's a book that, if you can get that book, it shouldn't be that hard to find, but go to your local comic book shop. If you don't know where it is, look it up.
Comixology is your friend.
Comixology is also your friend. But yeah, I hope that book gets a lot of support because it looks great, and I need to go.
What gives me hope for that book is that it's a maxi. I believe it's a 12-issue maxi series.
Yeah,
and that it's part of the DC Young Animal imprint, and they tend to let those series breathe on their own.
Yeah,
and they tend to support them too. So that's what kind of is giving me hope from this book. I mean, I know you probably don't want to comment on rumors, but I know the rumor is that she's being groomed to take over as like the main Green Lantern after whatever Grant Morrison is doing is over.
Look, I love that because Green Lantern is a series in general where Jeff Johns did like the quintessential Green Lantern, and he did that to death. You know what I mean?
It's almost gospel.
Right. He did it in such a way that like, what do you do now? Right. Like you just kind of like the story of Hal Jordan isn't over, but like he really went to every edge and corner of that. But you still have so many other people, doing touting the Green Lantern identity and creating these new characters that can kind of exist in this world. I think is not only a good idea, but like, it's like, again, another rumor that they're talking about with the woman that plays Moneypenny kind of taking over as James Bond eventually, like in the sense that like 007 isn't James Bond. Like 007 is the identifier for that specific agent. So,
right.
Like, anybody can be 007. Like she's not going to be James Bond, but she can be 007.
Yeah.
Whereas, similar situation, like there are multiple people who are Green Lantern. Like, Hal Jordan is maybe Green Lantern Prime, but like there's so many, whether it's Jon Stewart, whether it's Kyle Rayner, whether it's Guy Gardner, like there's so many Green Lanterns in general that you don't have to just focus on the one. So, whether she's being brought in to carry her Far Sector story into the main DC universe, or whether they're just gonna let her kind of redo things when she gets up there, like I give her the keys, because again, like not only is she bringing in a huge audience on her own from all the work that she's done before, but this is something that I feel strongly about in terms of both Marvel and DC. Like these characters have been going for 75, 80 years, predominantly written by white men. Like eventually, at some point, again, white people aren't a monolith, black people aren't a monolith, but you need different perspectives, right? You need different people to come in and write these stories. And the fact that there hasn't been a black person who's got to write a long sustained run on Batman, the fact that there hasn't ever been a woman who's gotten the chance to write a long sustained run on Superman, the fact that like people from all kinds of different identities have not been able to get a crack at these bigger superhero titles is one of those things where, like, again, these things are gonna die. Like Spider-Man isn't gonna stop tomorrow, but if you want to keep these things fresh, if you want to bring in a new audience, if you want to continue to grow, not only just your brand but the industry as a whole, like you need different people telling different stories, because we haven't seen every Superman story, we haven't seen every X-Men story, we haven't seen every Green Lantern story, but there's a lot of different stories that we haven't been able to see, and it's not, a product of people intentionally being kept out, but it is kind of a product of, not intentionally thinking of making that shift. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you have to say, hey, it looks like we've been running this thing for 80 years now and we haven't let a woman write most of these main books. Like that might be an idea to do. That might be something to try, because there's evidence from a lot of the talented women, whether it's Kelly Sue DeConnick, whether it's Gail Simone, whether it's now even you look at Eve Ewing and what she was doing with Ironheart, or you look at Annette Okorafor, or just across the line. Hopefully now N.K. Jemisin, like a lot of talented people out there,
Yes.
just waiting around for you to give them a call and say, hey, would you like to do this thing that I'm sure they would all really love to do? So yeah, I mean, that's, I'll say it again, even without having read the book at all, just having seen the previews and read a little bit about it ahead of time, like go buy Far Sector, go read On Comics Grounds review of it, because I'm sure it's gonna get an amazing score, and like just support books like that, because I that's a book that I want to see all 12 issues of, but more beyond that as well.
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Jordan. for
Yeah,
hanging
no
out
problem.
with us. It's been amazing. Like hearing your perspective on things. I am so thankful that you want to support my boy Victor Stone, because I need more people to be on my team right here. Like I did a whole episode just for him. Like it didn't matter. Like these guys were mad at me. Like I wanted it so bad.
Who was mad? No one was mad.
Okay, but like,
Yeah.
I could tell y'all were bored. Like, I understand. Like, I was nerding out, giving my history lesson. I had my chalkboard and everything. Like, I understand. But like, I need more people on my team. So like, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I think again, Cyborg is a character who, they've, I guess, I don't know if reboot is the word, but like they've tried to put him in different situations, and somehow again it always comes back to the man versus machine trope that they've run time after time. And even the villains, like he's fighting like viruses and like the internet and like all this stuff, where it's like, I guess this is cool, but like it hasn't really gone through the depths. And like you're saying, like they've touched on things and they've kind of begun to explore things, in several different runs, but it'd be nice to get a real in-depth look at Cyborg the character, but also Cyborg the human being, and also Cyborg as just like how he's looked at, because that's another thing we really don't get that much of, is in universe Black people's response and how they interact with the heroes that look like them, right? Like how do you look at Black Panther? Because like we know how Wakanda looks at Black Panther, but like, how do kids in Chicago look at Black Panther, and like, how do kids in Compton look at Black Panther? Like, are they like, that's cool, but that's not happening where I live, so like, I don't care about that, or like, oh man, like I could be Black Panther, like, is he like an inspirational figure, or is he somebody who's just kind of like doing stuff but not really doing things that are affecting their lives, so like they don't have time to think about that. But I mean, again, that's just something where you get somebody coming in, and like, again, Ta-Nehisi Coates run on Black Panther has been excellent. So having somebody who can kind of come in and just touch on those things would be very, very much appreciated, but also just a really different, interesting, compelling look. So like, if I could do that with Cyborg, like, I'll publicly petition for that. Like, I want to do that.
We're gonna speak it into existence. You heard it the first time.
Yeah, I have no
Cyborg by
problem with
Jordan
that.
Clark coming soon.
Yeah, I
Speak it
mean,
into existence.
look, fingers crossed.
Yes. All right. Thank you once again for coming on
Yeah,
the
thank you
podcast
guys.
and hanging out with us. You can check I know there is the physical copy on the Etsy store, but where can people find your work that way people can reach out to you?
So, if you go to jclarkcomics.squarespace.com, that has all of my comics on there. So you can find The Skinnaman, you can find Elk Mountain, you can find some of my older work. If you go to Comixology, starting next week, you can find Elk Mountain on there as well. And also you can find the Bitch Planet issue that I did, which is the second issue of the Bitch Planet triple feature. Or you can just get the trade of the Bitch Planet triple feature, so you can get all the great stories that were in there, including my story. So those are the main places right now. And then hopefully sometime in the near future, you can also go to your local comic shop and get a story by me in a comic by a bigger publisher that I will be able to talk about later. So yeah, those are the main places. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, at jrsosa18, that's the same for Instagram. So you can find me on there, and all of my comic stuff is listed on there as well.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, folks. Don't forget that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at on Comics Ground, and at I cannot talk tonight, and at Blerd Grounds, where you can follow us there. You can listen to this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Podcast Brother, wherever you can listen to a podcast besides SoundCloud, we're probably there. So check us out and subscribe to us. That way we can track those numbers. We can, if you want to review us on Apple Podcasts, where people can find us better, that's something that you can do. Check out the website oncomicsground.com, or like we've already hit that. Our review of Far Sector is coming. We post new reviews every weekday for you folks, so please check that out. And we will be back next week, with a brand new episode for you folks. And we are gearing up for our season finale / winter finale that is coming December 13th. We are kicking off the Blerd Crusade, where it's going to be our D&D adventure. So get ready for that. All right, Travis, what is your closing statement for this episode? You've been very quiet this evening.
It's so wonderful to hear the entire arc of everything we've said throughout the show be megaphones throughout a creator in the industry. Yes. And thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
All right, Marcus, what is your closing statement for this episode?
Man, just thanks for coming on with us. This was a great conversation. When you're able to announce your new book with one of the big two, we'd love to have you back on so we can talk about it.
Most definitely.
Sure.
All right, and then Mr. Clark, is there anything you'd like to say before we head
out? Just keep reading comics. Keep supporting, creators out there that are trying to do something different and interesting. I was talking to somebody earlier today. There's 7 weeks left in this year. We made it, y'all. We're almost we're almost out. So yeah, just everybody be safe. Everybody, keep finding those little joys that you can in life, because it's not easy every day. sometimes it gets a little difficult, but for me, comics makes it better, and having conversations like this and being parts of communities like this make it better. So, uh, just we're almost there, and keep it going.
All right. And my closing statement, as always, is that, like he said, support support the material that you want to see yourself in. Keep it going. That way, we can keep the show going. We can keep talking about the amazing content that's coming out. So, thank you so much for tuning in. If I don't say it, Travis will. Keep watching Watchmen, because we'll probably have an update episode on that soon. That way, Travis can pull out his cork board and draw all the conclusions.
Bro, I've been
Man
going
for the
so
win.
hard.
Move man for the win.
Oh my god! I haven't even watched this week's episode, and just from what you said, I'm not ready for this. Also,
No.
if you go to your local Walmart, Pokemon Sword and Shield is live, so take care of yourselves out here, folks. Spoilers are out. It doesn't matter anymore. Like a fair game. Like, the leaks were one thing, but fair game. Y'all, no one is safe. I have my copy in my hand, so yes, yes, I am so hyped. All right, we will catch you folks next time right here at Blerd Grounds. Peace out.